I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be a bit of a belated TBR for the Canada 150 Reading Challenge. Aaron from Waiting Moose came up with this set of 6 questions to basically encourage people to read on a Canadian theme, since July 1st was the 150th anniversary of Canada. I was almost going to say the 150th Canada Day, but since it used to be called Dominion Day, that's not technically true. In any case, let's go through the questions. The first of the 6 challenges is to read something that is set in Canada. And this is actually a book that I just finished last night, and that is Catherine Hernandez's Scarborough, which, as the title suggests, is set in Scarborough. For people who aren't from the GTA, Scarborough is the eastern part of the city of Toronto. I've seen some people reviewing this and have described it, and I gather that maybe on the back of the physical book it actually describes it as being outside of Toronto. That is not true. As much as people downtown want to make fun of Scarborough, which has a lot of, there are a lot of sociocultural issues with people doing that, but which actually this book kind of touches on. In any case, it's set in Scarborough, so it's set in Canada. Although, I've got to say, the 2 subway stations that they mention in the book are Warden and Kennedy. And if you look at the picture on the cover, there's a girl running through, and it's clearly a TTC station, but both Warden and Kennedy have the platform in the middle, and that one, you can see it's one with the platform on the opposite side. False advertising. Anyway, so question number 2 is read a book by a Canadian author. Now, that first book does count, but I'm going to count something that I read day before yesterday, and that's M.G. Vassanji's When She Was Queen, which is a collection of short stories, some of which are actually set in Canada, mostly Toronto, mostly around Don Mills. Some of which are set in Kenya, some are in Tanzania, some are in the US. If you've watched many of my videos before, he is one of my favorite writers, so I talk about his writing all the time. But yeah, so that fits that. He's Canadian. Challenge number 3 is to read a book with red or white on the cover. And I'm going to cheat a little bit in this and go for a book where the spine is pink and white, because pink and red are pretty close. And that's going to be Tracey Lindberg's Birdie, which is another set in Canada by a Canadian author. This one is about a woman from northern Alberta who goes out to BC to find a cousin, I believe, but also to find one of the actors from the Beachcombers, which I thought was such a crazily specific Canadian reference that one of my favorite things has been watching non-Canadians read this book and see what they think, because even though I haven't read it yet, just the concept of that seems so culturally specific that I've been fascinated by watching people in the US and Australia and Europe commenting on this. So. Question number 4 is read a Canadian nonfiction book. And for that, I thought I would pick up Montcalm and Wolfe, which is by Roch, who writes a bit of everything. He's the one, if you're Canadian, you'll probably know the hockey sweater, because I think everyone had to read that in primary school. Whether you read it in English or French is probably depends on where you went to school. He also wrote the novel La Guerre, Sir, which I know I had to read in high school, and I imagine a lot of other people did too. And he writes nonfiction, so he's just everywhere. It's about basically the battle that created the French-English divide, more or less, back in 1759, when British troops overpowered a French garrison, which essentially created the Canada we know today, at least in terms of the European power struggles. Question number 5 is read a book of Canadian poetry. And I couldn't think of one, so I'm going to skip that, and instead of that, I'm going to read Our Story, Aboriginal Voices on Canada's Past. It's by a whole bunch of people. Thompson Highway, Thomas King, Tantu Cardinal, who I always think of as an actress, but I guess she writes as well. And I think this is bits of both fiction and nonfiction and political commentary, still short form work. And I know that's not exactly the intent, but that's what I'm going to do. And the final question is to read a book about hockey or curling. I've always heard that the best book about hockey is Ken Dryden's The Game. And you always hear that one of the best novels involving hockey is Richard Wagamese's Indian Horse. And I've been wanting to pick up another one of his novels ever since I read his memoir last year. I think he died recently too. So I haven't decided between those two. I just looked at the video preview on the camera and I realized I'm wearing like Brazil's colors here, and I really ought to have been wearing Canadian colors for this. But hey. In any case, thanks to Aaron from Waiting Moose for coming up with the idea. And I imagine a lot of people have already made up lists because we're now almost in the middle of July. But if you're reading on a Canadian theme this month. What are you reading? And what did you pick for poetry? Because I didn't know what to choose, and I was trying to go with things that I already have, so that's part of my excuse for not picking a poetry option. But hey. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.